and welcome to the session, Rights and Wrongs, Human Rights in Pakistan. Our speakers today are Ali Dayan Hassan, Hamid Khan, Aya Rahman, and Asma Jahangir. It will be moderated by Justice Nasra Iqbal. May I just request if you could please turn off your mobile phones. The session will last for 60 minutes, and at the end of which there will be a 10-minute question and answer session. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. We are all so thrilled to be in Karachi and see this spectacular festival. After what we see on the TV every day, this looks like a miracle, and I hope that this miracle lasts. The subject of this panel is Rights and Wrongs, Human Rights in Pakistan. And I have 4 stars on the panel, so I have really nothing to do except to see that they don't overstep their time limits. We have 1 hour in total, and I was suggesting that we have 10 minutes for each panelist and the remainder for Q&A, so that we have an interactive session. So in order of how it's listed here, I would request Mr. Ali Dayan Hassan from Human Rights Watch, and of course we recently had a report from the Human Rights Watch which became very controversial, but maybe he would like to address the concerns in that particular.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. The title of the session is Rights and Wrongs. Now, we all know what our rights are, but where they go wrong is actually, I think, the greater issue. We have just walked in, maybe some of you have also, from a session on Balochistan, and we heard there what happened, and the point is that I deal with this information all the time, and every time I hear it again, I am horror-struck. The fact of the matter is that we are facing a very unique set of challenges. We have a security situation, and we have a state that refuses to allow any kind of transparency or accountability and engages in abuses with impunity. This situation is, in my view, quite unacceptable. It is, I think, the human rights movement, whether it is international or in Pakistan, is only asking for the reasonable thing. And the reasonable thing is that people not be kidnapped, people not be disappeared, people not be killed. The rule of law, a rights-respecting rule of law should prevail, and there should be a constitutional democratic process in Pakistan. I don't think that these are unreasonable demands. I think that the idea that somehow by voicing these demands, by speaking out for people who are being killed or disappeared, that you are being unpatriotic, that you are being seditious, are frankly, it is the retort of those who do not have any argument or morality to support them. It is actually as simple as that. इसमें मैं ज़रा उर्दू में भी बात कर लूँ. बात ये है कि जब आप इंसानी हुकूक की बात कर रहे होते हैं, उसका मकसद ये नहीं है कि आप पाकिस्तान के ख़िलाफ़ बात कर रहे हैं, उसका मकसद ये नहीं है कि आप कोई ऐसी बात कर रहे हैं जिससे पाकिस्तान को नुकसान पहुंचेगा. असल में तो ये पाकिस्तान के फ़ायदे की बात है. ये वो बात है, अगर आज हम लोग नहीं बोले इन मसाइल के ऊपर, कल आप उठाए जाएंगे, हम उठाए जाएंगे, हम सब मारे जाएंगे. And that is the principal issue. The issue is, how do we create a rights-respecting society? I really, 10 minutes is a very long time, and particularly with Asma Jahangir present here, and Rahman Saab present here, and Hamid Khan Saab present here, who are all far better experts, greater experts, eminent people than me, certainly. I don't think that I should take up that amount of time. I think that I should leave this opportunity to them to speak on these issues. They are everything, certainly, that I have learned from them. and I think I'll just pass on to them, and then we can come back and engage in the Q&A.
That was very modest and generous of you. But we'll take you up on that. And may I now request Mr. Hamid Khan? He has been the president of the Supreme Court Bar Association and is generally known as a human rights activist to address the subject. Mr. Hamid Khan.
Thank you, Madam. I thought I'll speak later on, but anyway. Well, this is an area which we all are concerned about very deeply. And there are two things which I must point out, that there are two aspects of the human rights situation in Pakistan. One would be the internal situation, the other would be the external situation. And both have its repercussions, its ramifications on our internal situation. When we talk about the internal situation, we are particularly bothered about situations that exist in Balochistan, which is the most dire one. And there have been colossal human rights violations over there, missing persons, kidnappings, and whatnot. And even ethnic cleansing. Unfortunate part of the Balochistan situation has been that ethnic cleansing, something which has not been brought out very much in the media. Somehow there is a fear that they may not be taken as something anti-Baloch. It is certainly not. The grievance of Baloch over the last 65 years are very genuine. Even today, the government that has been formed for the last 5 years does not represent the population of Balochistan. Any of the ethnic groups are not represented. Unfortunately, it happened because of peculiar circumstances of 2008. What happened was that it was on those very unfortunate circumstances when 3rd of November emergency, unconstitutional emergency was imposed. The elections were called immediately and to be held somewhere early June that 2008. So the result was that many parties thought that there is no use of participating in these elections because they are all pre-rigged by General Musharraf and his favorite political parties at that time, PMLQ. So therefore, many of us thought that there is no use participating in these elections. And those included the nationalist parties of Balochistan. What most unfortunate thing that happened was that nearly all the nationalist parties in Balochistan decided to boycott the elections. So the result was those who had no political roots in Balochistan got elected. PMLQ, some other parties which have no roots in Balochistan, political roots, they got elected. So for 5 years, we have no government in Balochistan. Only a bunch of looters who sit there together, who have agreed that entire budget has to be culled by them. And nothing should reach the common man. And that has created, I must say, that situation, but was never remedied. Because it could have been remedied had after the assassination of Benazir Bhutto, if they had given time to these Baloch parties, because they extended the elections by about 6 weeks, they should have given time to the other parties who had boycotted under the peculiar circumstances earlier. And had they allowed that time, I think many parties which had originally boycotted might have participated. And the greatest sufferer of this situation is Balochistan, because Balochistan remained totally unrepresented for the last 5 years. And then, of course, they were at the mercy of the bureaucracy. They were at the mercy of an extremely corrupt government, irresponsible to the extent that the chief minister does not even live there. So the situation had gotten from bad to worse. This situation opened up for those who wanted to get into the act of ethnic cleansing. So you will find outside Quetta, nearly every small town, Punjabi population was wiped out. That was the first thing that happened. It was wiped out from there. So all those, either they became refugees in Punjab, in Karachi, or in Quetta. This happened for all those living outside Quetta, Punjabi population, and this also happened to the Shia population living outside Quetta. Even inside Quetta, we know it's very recent, but they were particularly picked on because there seemed to be some extremist parties going together. One with the intention of cleansing non-Baloch out of that area, and the other was for picking up on Shias. So they suffered the most at the hands to begin with. Now, unfortunately, what happens? How was it reacted upon? They should have been saved at that point in time. Our government agencies proved totally useless at that time when this cleansing was going on in Balochistan. Nobody moved. It was just, they were sitting ducks. They were taken out of the buses and shot down. That's it, what was happening. And it was only a matter of news and nothing else. The government was doing nothing at that time. Then our intelligence agencies came into action. And what they started doing? Now they had started reacting. Instead of saving that population which was being cleansed, those people who had come to Balochistan some 70 years ago, who settled in after the earthquake in Quetta, they were not saved, but they started reacting by picking up the Baloch activists and started killing them. This is how you will stop the cleansing. I don't think so it ever happened. So in the first place, those who were wronged, they got no relief. They had to run away. They had to leave their homes and hearths and go to Punjab, go to Karachi, go to other places. And then subsequently, without knowing that who has actually done that, they started picking on activists on the basis of no trial, no information, their own secret information, and started killing them, dumping their bodies. So, wrong against a wrong is the story of Balochistan for the last 5 years. Some committing wrongs against a certain group of people, some others doing wrong to those who may not be responsible for doing that wrong. So unfortunately, that's where we stand today. Then comes Pakhtunkhwa. The story is very common. I don't have to dwell on that for long, how things are going on in the last 5 years particularly, and even longer than that, because that is the main target of it, whether it was Swat, whether North Waziristan, whatever it is in a terrible shape. And Karachi, everybody knows, these are 3 spots which are the most sensitive in Pakistan where things have happened. What has made it even worse were the external factors. See what US drones have done to Pakhtunkhwa. They have produced a huge class of people, of persons who have been killed, whose families have been killed, who have nowhere to go but to fall into the hands of extremists and militants, and ultimately become their fodder. Poor young boys and young girls, they have become fodder in the hands of these militants who are being used for all kind of political purposes, for spreading their own view of Islam. This is what has happened as a result of it. And this is going on. And our government, whether it was Musharraf's government or Zardari's government, equally complicit in this. Whatever they are doing, they are letting them do all that. They said, we will only be making a very feeble protest. But don't worry about that. You go and keep on killing our people. And that's what they are doing it. What do they care about the collateral damage? What does it matter? They only count the bodies of Americans or maybe NATO soldiers who get killed in the area. Nobody counts the bodies of Pakistanis who ever get killed, who have been killed over and over and over again. Our military personnel, they are not even ready to apologize for killing 24 soldiers without reason. So this is the state of affairs in which we are faced with. Okay, it's okay. Thanks. So we can say that these U.S. drone attacks is one of the main reasons for our destabilizing the province of Pakhtunkhwa in Pakistan, and this is one of the colossal human rights violation that is taking place in that, where Pakistanis are being killed as collateral damage by several estimates. 90% of people killed in drone attacks are innocents, they are non-combatants, they are women and children, and whose families ultimately became the fodder in the hands of these extremists. There are many factors, let me not go into them, but certainly American intelligence is very much complicit in this. Very much our own intelligence agencies are complicit in that. The government has been complicit in that. It shows how much we care, our governments care for our own human rights. This shows they don't care if our people get killed at the hands of the foreign powers. Doesn't matter to them as long as they provide stability to their government. As long as they can perpetuate in power, they don't care about the human rights of ordinary citizens. And the last thing which I'll say, which are generally not talked about while we are talking about human rights. Corruption itself is one of the greatest violations of human rights, which is at its highest in Pakistan the last 5 years. Everything has been eaten up by corruption over the years. Providing 5 billion rupees house openly to a political leader by a real estate tycoon is something. The corruption is no longer a question in the country. They have reduced things down to this, and this shows what is the others' human rights. What do the others can expect? That some people can enrich themselves beyond our limits, while others are suffering in poverty, suffering for lack of employment, suffering for lack of basic human needs, which are not being provided by the government, but the ruling classes are enjoying their best time in their lives. So realizing that, I think I should stop here, and we can discuss anything further in questions and answers. This is the state as I see at present. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hamid Khan. You have particularly highlighted the humanitarian crises that we are facing in different parts of Pakistan. And the word collateral damage appears to be such an innocuous expression, but it means that we have actually exterminated so many innocent lives. But I will not dwell on these matters because Mr. Ayer Rahman, a distinguished intellectual thinker, human rights activist, and senior amongst us all, will have the last word before Asma. Mr. Ayer Rahman.
Thank you very much. Rights and wrongs. This is such an open-ended theme that one can begin from one thing and go to another. It would have been better if we had taken a small theme and discussed it in detail and in depth. But one should be grateful for this initiative, that at least there is such a distinguished gathering to hear and listen to what we have to say about human rights in Pakistan. Everything, as Hamid Saab has pointed out, there is much wrong with government, and there is always wrong something with the politicians, in this country. But there are institutional problems. Our constitutional guarantees are weak, and whatever guarantees are there, the laws have not been made to implement them, and where laws have been made, they are not being implemented. So this is a long story of plight. But I would like to draw your attention to something which is not generally acknowledged, and that is that our wrongs are institutionalized because of the nature of rule. Whether it's X or Y, is the nature of arbitrary rule in Pakistan. You see? If you talk of Balochistan, all the troubles in Balochistan and the violations of human rights can be attributed to the fact that Balochistan is not under civilian control, has not been under civilian control at all. So that is the root cause of all the problems. Similarly, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, in FATA, where we have laws, such stupid and barbaric laws as action in aid of civil power. What a fancy name it is, but what it hides is total oppression, detention of people without trial, and unlimited detention. They can detain people indefinitely. But At the moment, we should take into account this fact that Pakistan society is in a ferment. So long as women were not asking for their rights, there was no problem. There was complete peace. Trouble arises when a woman wants to go to have a career, when a girl wants to go to school, when she wants to marry by her own choice, she wants to have her own independence, she wants to inherit the property of her father, then the problem starts. So, similarly, so long as the Baloch were not asking for their rights, no problem. But when all this question of disappearances and missing persons is a direct consequence of the Balochistan people's aspirations for their share in the national cake, for their autonomy, for the right to be masters in their own land. So this is why I mention this, because since this tussle is going to increase, we will have more wrongs than we have at the moment, because a new factor has entered in this discussion, and that is arbitrariness institutionalized by military rulers in Pakistan has completely destroyed the people's culture. And even today there are people who otherwise look sane and intelligent, who are all the time asking for a military to come back and set things in order. So that is one problem. And the other is the rise of extremism. You see, the way extremism is spreading and it is interfering with the lives of the people, you will have more wrongs than rights. So we are in a pincer movement at the moment. At the one end, authoritarian forces are pressing on us, denying the democratic space, interfering with the rule of law, with Hamid Saab knows better and Begum Nasir Iqbal knows better. How can we have rights when there is no justice? Justice is a commodity that you can buy. For the poor man, there is no justice. For the Kohli or the Megwal and the Bhil, there is no justice. For women, there is no justice. You see? So in this situation, extremism comes and they say beheading people is correct, excommunicating people is correct, the Shias are kafir, therefore they should be beheaded, the Hazaras have no right to live in Quetta. So in this kind of situation, what we need is to concentrate less on law and more on social happening. Because human rights is essentially a matter of culture. Our culture was not very finely compatible with the regime of rights to begin with. And now our culture is deteriorating further. And it is assuming more and more unreasonable attitude towards rights. So, apart from the fact that we have instances, and sometimes we are so occupied with instances and numbers and figures that we forget to take a look at the broader picture of the whole society. You see, in the last 22 or 24 years that we have been working in the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, when we started, we identified the target groups. We felt women were the most important target group. We felt children were the important because we are a child majority country. And if children do not have their rights, it means the majority of the people in Pakistan do not have their rights. And we know what we have done for children. Then we thought minorities, we thought of workers, trade unions, workers, labor, factory labor, unemployed labor, home-based workers. After 24 years, these are the same priorities. We can admit that we have not been able to make a dent in any of these. Women are more discriminated against than before. Children are denied rights more than before. You see, it is easy to say so many schools have been opened, or so many institutions have been set up, or so many women have risen to their high positions. that they have done because through their own effort. And in spite of all the circumstances, in spite of all the hurdles, in spite of the inefficiency of the state and the government. So that is, in this situation, we have to concentrate on developing a culture of tolerance, a culture of respect for each other's rights, a culture for the views of each other, because we don't have a discourse. We cannot promote human rights without having an intelligent, informed discourse about everything. But today, we find that there are more things that we can't talk about than there were 20 years ago. So the incidents and the violations are symptoms of a deeper malaise that is eating into the vitals of Pakistan society, and that is that we consider ourselves wiser than anybody. Only we are right. The person who disagrees with us must be excommunicated or beheaded. So this culture of intolerance and violence, and then holy violence, sanctified by the high priest in a religion which admits of no priest. So that is the main concern. And it is the duty of those who can generate ideas, such as the distinguished gathering here, because the common people who live in Badin and Khuzdar and such places, they look up to you to give them ideas and to enable them to realize whatever rights they have recognized. Even today, there are people who feel that they have a duty to obey to everything, that they have a duty to obey their parents, they have a duty to obey their teachers, obey their priests, obey the government, obey the spy, obey the general, and everybody. So in that kind of atmosphere, when people do not have the right to question, when people do not have the right to ask how it is done and why it is done, it will be difficult for us to make any headway towards establishing a regime of rights. Practical instances are useful, but they merely illustrate the bigger story, and that is that we are going from bad to worse so far as rights are concerned. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Ayer Rahman. You have very rightly articulated your concerns about the human rights situation across the social spectrum, including women, children, vulnerable groups, including laborers, and those people who are belonging to the wrong sect, as the majority would like to believe, and the fact that we are all socially responsible because we have spread a culture of intolerance, and access to justice is something that needs to be available to every citizen if we want these wrongs to be righted. Asma Jahangir, as you all know, needs no introduction. She is the bravest woman of the millennium. She has stood up for women's rights and human rights when people in Pakistan didn't even know what human rights were. And because of her, awareness has generally spread of the problems that we face regarding the wrongs that are being committed against human rights. But I will not stand between you and Asma. The floor is hers now.
Thank you, Nasra. Thank you very much for those generous words. But I was going to start my talk by saying that where you do have barbaric people who cannot stand the sight of women, we also have in Pakistan the Malalas of Pakistan. And I would like to begin this talk by dedicating whatever little I have to contribute today in the name of Malala, and hope that every child not just women, is the Malala of our future. I just want to start by saying that we have come a long way. When we were young activists, we always thought of human rights violations, and that's the conventional way of looking at violations, was violation when the state committed a violation. But now there is an increasing role of non-state actors that are tolerated by the state who commit human rights violations as well. And so it is connected to the state because the state has to take care and protect individuals that are living within that country, regardless whether they are citizens or not. So even Professor Qadri has his rights as a citizen here if his right is violated. There are two main issues in Pakistan, which Mr. Ayyar Rahman quite rightly pointed out. If I were to say pick out two things, because there are several things wrong. We see people being tortured every day in police custody. We see prisoners who have spent time and their sentence has been, they have forgone their sentence and yet they are sitting in prison. We have seen women for years who were put in jail under the notorious Zina ordinance, and I recall that at that time I just started practice. And so whenever we went to court for their bail, we were told several times by honorable moral judges that why are you here to defend an immoral woman? And gradually they began to realize that the immorality was not of the woman, but of the law itself. And after decades, we were able to change that law. And if you see this women prison population now, women who are arrested under the Zina ordinance has dramatically dropped, though it has not completely finished. But it is some headway. So I think that what we are looking at here today are two issues that I could put everything under. One is the rising intolerance, and the second is impunity. Because impunity is so wide in this country that if you, please don't take it in another way, but if you are a highly religious person, you can commit murder and get away with it. That's impunity. If you are from the establishment, you can do anything and get away with it. It's impunity. So impunity in our country really doesn't come between rich and poor, because there is another kind of impunity there too. But there is also another dividing line in Pakistan, that if you are a right-wing conservative, you have an automatic impunity. If you're a radical liberal, you will be caught at every word that you say, and there will be no impunity for you. So I think that these are issues that we have to address. For example, Hamid Saab talked about, and quite rightly, about external and internal and the connections between that. And let me just trace back to you, and Mr. Ayyar Rahman is here. So to give him the credit, he sort of pointed out that people are disappearing in Pakistan. He was the first person to point out that people were disappearing in Pakistan. And when we looked at the pattern, the first lot of disappeared people were those that were picked up during the Musharraf regime and given to CIA to be taken to Guantanamo Bay or to be taken to Kabul for interrogation. And since the CIA gave this noble task, so-called, to our ISI, who thought that now they should help themselves too. So once they finished with handing over the so-called militants to CIA, and I will come back to the so-called militants as well, because I met some of them who returned. And we also have letters from some of them. And not all of them were militants, of course, who were in Guantanamo Bay. And Guantanamo Bay itself is another big question mark. And I think the international and the national communities of human rights have all questioned it and are all against those kinds of detention centers. I myself had the opportunity in the UN to write a report on it with other special rapporteurs, and we did write a very scathing report on it. So this is what external and internal actually do get together, and we have had problems there. But I would not go so far as to say that everything that goes wrong here is external, because I think that we have had, and we need to now, get out of the self-denial and accept the fact that brutality by the security forces of this country have been going on for decades, and they have got away with it with impunity. If we are talking about Balochistan, and let me again say that when the issue of Balochistan comes up, I think the Human Rights Commission was the first to talk about Balochistan when nobody in the international community or in the national sphere was talking about it, and indeed were sent, or some of us were sent when Akbar Bukti was in the mountains, and we were criticized at that point that why were we going to save the life of a tribal chief, and it became difficult to explain that it was not a question of saving the life of a tribal chief, it was a question of stopping a kind of a barbaric extrajudicial killing which will have long-term effects on a population and indeed the entire country. So there the story is because that part of Balochistan or the country has forever been under the military control. And what they are asking for is their own supervision over their natural resources. But that supervision is not given to them. Their natural resources is something that the military has eyed and vied for many decades and not likely to give up. And therefore, when people say, will elections be held and will elections not be held, my question to them is that last time, somehow the nationalists boycotted elections. This time, they have said so far that they will be contesting election. How will the nationalists allow the military to take over all the smuggling in Chaman, the gold mines, the other natural resources that they have? So there is a big worry, and there should be a big worry amongst the establishment if these elections are held really truly in time, and I hope they are, and fair and free, and I hope they are. But let me say, for example, that when we talk about drone technology, many of you may know or not know that this technology has been criticized for many years because Israel has been using it for many years in Palestine too. And the Human Rights Watch was one of the first organizations to actually denounce this drone technology. And now in the United Nations human rights field, they have said this is a destructive technology, but there, as you all know, there are many destructive technologies, some of which we ourselves very proudly own as our national asset. And therefore, what is being said now is that let's put a law around it so that when it is going to be used, there must be certain restraints and certain guidelines of how it is going to be used. Now the other side of this is, and why I am speaking about it, I'll come to it, is that I for one denounce the drone technology because it can get into the hands of any government, destructive or not destructive, and can be misused as indeed it has been, and it has shown to be misused. But on the other hand, I would like to question the fact that when we talk about sovereignty of Pakistan, do we not talk about sovereignty of Pakistan when in North Waziristan foreigners sit there and there is no writ of the land there? We are too scared to say, where is the writ of the land in North Waziristan? Now those people are not exactly good-natured, well brought up individuals who are giving our children education there to become good citizens. And all the training that goes on there, I think this is the fundamental responsibility of the state to ensure that the protection of life to our citizens is ensured. And they cannot do that if they have safe havens in tribal areas, where they say that they are either helpless or unwilling to do it. But as most of us know, that we have heard this often enough, the good Taliban and the bad Taliban. Well, I have heard, I don't know, maybe all Taliban are good, but murderers are murderers. Killing is killing. And I think that we need to be sure about that. I was going to talk about what human rights defenders should do, but I will not go into that because we have been taught by Mr. Ayer Rahman, we need to verify our facts, have a credibility, because after all, the only thing we have is a moral authority. And we have to push the envelope, but also look at the timings, take our opportunities, but be responsible so that you don't risk other people's lives. Now, I have, for example, Rahman Saab has talked about a law which we have challenged in the Supreme Court. It is one of the most notorious laws that this government has enacted, where a person can be arrested for indefinite period. It is retrospective in nature, that people who were arrested 4 or 5 years ago can be legalized under this, and then any security officer can give us evidence, and that evidence is conclusive against them. And I believe that this is something that we cannot accept, and this is against democracy. We also must talk about taboos. For example, I know that people think it's very dangerous to talk about minority rights, and so people will talk about minority rights. Yes, we must talk about the rights of Shias, we must talk about the rights of Hindus, we must talk about the rights of Christians, but we must also talk about the rights of Ahmadis. And unless we do not do that, I do not think that we will be doing justice to ourselves as human rights activists to ignore one community that is under constant threat, and anyone who supports them is, in a way, to their mind, is also being labeled as an Ahmadi. Now, I think that Hamid Khan Sahib is absolutely right that one of the evils and something that is eating this country up is corruption. And corruption brings bad governance. I think the world is moving now towards a right to good governance. But, and there is no two buts and ifs about it. We need to have a good mechanism for corruption, looking at corruption, anti-corruption mechanism, people there who should be manning it, people like Mr. Ayer Rahman, who will not spare anyone, I can assure you. Not ex-generals and ex-judges, excuse me. But I will take one moment. But I just want to end, Nasra, by saying that to actually progress, not only as human rights defenders, but also as politically astute people, please understand that all our institutions are rotting. There was a time when we used to say the generals can do no wrong. Now we say the Chief Justice can do no wrong. We look at the institution, my own institution, lawyers, who go and greet Mr. Qadri, who was the killer of Salman, the governor. I don't think that any lawyer in any other country would have got away with that. If we look at, for example, the press itself, although I would fight till my dying day for the freedom of the press, but at the same time, I think when the press begins to incite people to violence, which they did in the case of Ali Dayan, by giving his telephone numbers, we must with one voice condemn it. We must in one voice say that this is wrong. And I'm afraid that to me it is a routine thing. So I believe that unless we do not have, and this is where I'm ending, institutions that will have tolerance, that will respect rule of law, that will respect people's individual rights and collective rights, we will not be able to go forward. And there is no substitute to building a public opinion that will respect human rights, because after all, politicians will only go where public opinion goes. Thank you.
Thank you, Asma. The key words in Asma's presentation were impunity and intolerance. And she emphasized that we have all to raise our voices for the rule of law if we want to have human rights available to the citizens. Ali Hassan Dayan, of course, had given up some of his time to begin with, and he would like to say a few words before we open the Q&A.
Thank you very much. The reason why younger people like me, like Mrs. Jahangir, is because she does not seek refuge in cliché. She's quite categorical about things. I would like to make a few points. Firstly, about the business of drone strikes. Now, predator drone strikes are illegal. They are an abuse of human rights, certainly. But if you were to build a human rights abuse map of Pakistan, this is by far not the most serious issue. And I think we need to be absolutely categorical about that. The fact of the matter is, and I think that this is something that is very, very important, we have in the city of Quetta today 500,000 Hazaras who live in a ghetto. They have been reduced to a ghetto. Stepping out for them is difficult. If they step out, they are killed. Food prices have risen inside the ghetto. They cannot eat. And in January, murderers went into the ghetto and killed them. So previously, they couldn't step out. Now they are not even safe inside. When I talk about euphemism and cliché, I would like to point out to you, there is a group that claims responsibility for killing the Hazaras. Loud and clear. It's called the Lashkar-e-Jhangvi. We have to acknowledge that that's what it is. It is not Kalaband Tanzim. It is not a banned organization that is unnamed. It is that group. If two Hazaras are shot dead between two FC checkposts, who is responsible? The FC is responsible. The people who control the FC is responsible. And the former corrupt and incompetent government of Balochistan has never controlled the FC. These are our facts. We cannot be in denial about them. And those of us who actually bring these things up should not be attacked for bringing up what is staring us in the face. I think that it's absolutely important for us to introduce some clarity in this situation. The judiciary of Pakistan has highlighted these abuses in Balochistan and across Pakistan, but I put to you that where does impunity stem from? Impunity stems from the fact that there is a crisis of the criminal justice system that runs across the board in our country. It is all very well for the Honorable Chief Justice to engage in well-meaning and positive rhetoric, but it has to be accompanied by action. Impunity ends with accountability. Somebody has to be held accountable, and as long as we do not hold people accountable, we can engage in all the rhetoric in the world. It is not going to change a thing. It is time to dispense with the rhetoric. It is time to move on from blaming the other, whoever the other may be. India one day, Afghanistan the other, the US is the flavor of the month. And look within. There is, I'm afraid, an ugliness within, and if we don't face it, it will only get worse.
Thank you, Ali Hassan Dayan. We have about 10 minutes left, so I'm afraid there's just about time for 2 or 3 questions. If you could just make a focused question, identify yourself. If you have it in writing, that would be best. Gentlemen, there's somebody with a mauve shirt in the back who had raised their hand. Well, we have 3 people. The gentleman who has the mic now, the gentleman with the orange shirt, and the gentleman with the mauve shirt. Any lady who wants to ask a question? Yes, in black. So these are the 4 questions we can have, and maybe we should have them all together so that the panelists can answer. And if you have your answer from a specific person, please specify who you want to have. Please, just a minute.
I have a question to Ali Dayan. Hello, I have a question to Mr. Ali Dayan Hassan. What is you feel the role of judiciary most proactive, I think most dangerously proactive judiciary role, whether it would prove to be in the longer term pro-democratic, pro-human rights role, because I find something is mischievous in these things that they, when took up the case of the Balochistan, they outlined, they pointed towards the FC But ultimately, when they gave decision against the civilian government. What do you think? How this role will be proactive, will be positive as far as human rights
Thank
are?
you. Can we have the next question? Gentleman in mauve shirt, yes please. Please identify yourself and who you want to answer.
My name is Iqbal Detho and I'm a human rights activist and student. I differ with Ali Dayan as a human rights student.
Please make a question.
I'm questioning the collateral damage or the real damage by drone is not abuse. It is deliberate human rights violation by the state actors. And we know it is the violation of international humanitarian as well as human rights law. What we are facing, it is not the impunity of the national forces here, it is the immunity which the bilateral immunity agreement with the United States of America has forced on the countries of this region that if you want the bilateral aid, you have to enter into that, you will not surrender. And I asked Ms. Asma Jahangir that the International Criminal Court Forum, which has the jurisdiction war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide, that why we as a civil society and the human rights community, which she has pioneered and she's the inspiration of millions of people like me, that why we are not focusing on the political parties, she is in dialogue with them. Why government of Pakistan is not ratifying the International Criminal Court statute? I can assure you that no forces from whether country or international, they can be brought before the Hague for the war crimes if we are going to do it.
Thank you very much. The young man in orange shirt and the lady in black, yes.
My question is very simple. The work that HRSP is doing is great. My only suggestion or question is if they expand the network, because I read Sindhi papers and frankly, a lot of English papers that do not even publish the story. Dan gives like half of the page to Peterson and forget about the other papers. So if you could expand the network to Sakkar, a person where like the Dar Aman and Sakkar is in a miserable condition where 130 women are living like in just 4 rooms, So the role of judges, the district session judge is supposed to take the suo motu actions on human rights, but we never see that.
Thank you. The young lady in black. Mike, the lady in black, it's her turn.
Right.
My name is Farzana Khan, and I was hoping that somebody would touch upon the blasphemy law. My question is directed at Ms. Jahangir, and I just wanted to ask her opinion or her views about the blasphemy law under which a great deal of injustice is being carried out, especially against the minorities in Pakistan. So I would like to say something about it, please.
Thank you very much. So we have 4 questions. The first 2 are addressed to Ali Dayan, one about the role of the judges and the second about state actors violating the law and why we are not party to ICC, and same is also addressed to Asma. The third question is about no information about what is happening in the rural areas of Sindh, and the fourth question is about the blasphemy law. So over to you, Ali Dayan.
I think that an independent judiciary is absolutely essential to establishing any kind of rights respecting rule of law. I think that there is absolutely no debate and no question about that. However, this is a transitional democracy where various institutions are in a state of development and flux, and all of them, including the judiciary, overreach. And that overreach has to be challenged and scrutinized. Now, in terms of the personal imperatives of the judges, I really can't answer that question. I don't know these gentlemen. I think perhaps Mr. Hamid Khan, who knows them well, can answer that better. Secondly, on the issue of drone strikes, sir, I did not at all suggest that they were not a human rights violation. I did say to you that drone strikes are illegal as they occur. What I did add, however, is that they take place with the full knowledge and complicity of your military and your government, both military and civilian authorities. They are complicit in that. And I also pointed out to you that there are far greater human rights violations taking place across Pakistan which do not involve foreigners at either end. In the tribal areas, you have militants who are foreigners, you have an American involvement. What I am saying is that if you contextualize all of this in the broader framework, it is not quite as simple as that. And I think that I've answered my bits of the question, and now we move on to...
Well, I think that that question has been answered, but I think from the Human Rights Commission we have asked several times that Pakistan becomes a signatory to the Rome Statute, under which the criminal code comes. But I think that if you do that, and there are also going to be problems vice versa to you as well, because don't forget that you're not free of many violations that you have committed. We have impressed upon the government and political parties to do it, but political parties do not listen to us all the time. In fact, most times they don't listen to us. About the blasphemy laws, I think that my position is very clear. From the very beginning, when these laws were made, I feel that these laws should not have been made. I have also been looking at other countries, and I can assure you that, for example, in Nigeria, where these laws do exist in certain states, there is more intercommunal fights than in states where these laws do not exist. Even in India, where anti-conversion laws exist, there is constant tension and violence between communities. Where they do not exist, that tension does not prevail there. And I don't think they either they don't suit the purpose for what they were made. They have become a tool in the hands of vicious people. And very recently, the case of Sherry Rahman, where the Supreme Court has ordered that they haven't said that an FIR be filed, but more or less the procedure that they've said is that an FIR be filed against her, I think is a very dangerous precedent.
Mr. Hamid Khan and Mr. Ayar Rahman, would you like to add anything in a few minutes?
I have some problem with the equastics here. I have generally not been able to follow the questions asked, but is there any specific matter on which you're asking me to comment?
Well, one question was about the proactive judges and where you were going or something to that effect. Mr. Dayan Hassan had directed towards you, because you seem to know the matter.
Well, it's a very large question. What is the proactivity or activism of the judiciary? But certainly the judiciary lately has shown its sensitivity towards the problems of the breach of human rights throughout Pakistan. They have taken up the question of disappearances in Balochistan, taken up the matter of breakdown of law and order in Karachi. It's just another debate whether the judiciary is equipped to resolve those problems or not. There's certainly limitation involved because they are not equipped for that purpose. See, it is always for the executive to take care of law and order situations, which they are failing, which our law enforcing agencies have failed over the years, and they have not been able to protect people. Judiciary is trying to step into that sphere, trying to occupy the space which has been left occupied by the executive. And whether that really had any real effect or not, there can be a debate on that. Of course, it has only a limited effect. The judiciary cannot correct the situation that prevails in Karachi. Daily murders that are taking place, what judiciary can only pass an order, direct somebody. Same is true about Balochistan. Same is true about anything that is happening anywhere. But the bottom line is at least they are showing sensitivity to those problems, which previously our judiciary never showed. They just kept a blind eye towards what was happening to the common man. They would only be bothered by whatever was brought before them. And even there we thought that the enforcement of fundamental rights was not one of the highest priorities. So at least this is a step forward, I would say, without commenting on what real effect it has brought about to the grave situations that we are facing in the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ayar Rahman, would you like to add anything?
I think this has been answered. The only thing is that about the proactive judiciary, it is quite selective. I mean, there are quite a few blind spots. You know, the poor people are not on their radar, and the militants are not on their radar. We have still to find an order against the militants and extremists. And even the Balochistan petition, we feel very sorry. It was heard 1 year after it was filed. Whole year passed before the petition by Mr. Shakir, then President of High Court Bar Association, was taken up. So, all are equal, but some are more equal than others.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hamid Khan, Mr. Ayar Rahman, Mr. Ali Dayan Hassan, and Asma Jahangir. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being an excellent and participatory audience. We all know, and this is what we can really conclude, that each one of us has a responsibility towards creating human rights awareness and playing our role in seeing that human rights situation in Pakistan improves. And as Faiz said, that बोल के लब आवाज़ आज़ाद है तेरे, और जब तक हम बोलेंगे नहीं और इन चीज़ों को आइडेंटिफाई नहीं करेंगे, तब्दीली नहीं आएगी. बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया.